Okay, well, last time we talked about deacons and started that conversation about what deacons are and what they do and all those good things. And so, one of the main things we talked about was the word deacon and what it actually means. And if you remember, the word for deacon literally means a servant. There is both an informal term, so whereas all of us are deacons, we're all servants, we're all to be that, but yet there is also a formal office in the church for public service in the life of the congregation, formal. We see that beginning in Acts chapter 6 and verses 1 through 7, and we also see that in Philippians chapter 1, verse 1. And so today we're going to keep looking on with that. The Bible's vision again for deacons, it's sort of an oxymoron, but it is very true that it's very clear of what deacons are in the church. It's laid out for us who they are in character, but yet it is ambiguous. That's the hardest thing about deacons is there's not very much biblical data on what deacons do in churches. And so it's sort of up to the individual churches to figure out what exactly the diaconate is going to look like. And so that's sort of our task right now as a church is we've laid out elders and we've got all that in the Constitution and everything is looking good there. But yet we need to figure out exactly what deacons are in our church. And so the next thing that I want to show, and hopefully it'll work. We'll see if the sound comes through, and if it does, I'm going to run and grab a Bible. But the question is, what is the difference between elders and deacons? And here, let's see if it comes through.
What's the difference between elders and deacons? Well, there's a lot of confusion out there, which is one of the reasons that I wrote this book, to try to clear away some of that confusion and bring us back to what Scripture says about the two offices and how they're supposed to relate. So the office of elder is an office of spiritual oversight and an office of teaching in the life of the church, whereas the office of deacon is an office of practical service. Now, you can drive a wedge between those adjectives and create too much of a distinction there because, of course, elders are called to serve and deacons have a measure of leadership that has been delegated to them from the elders. It's been said that elders serve by leading and deacons lead by serving. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. One of the main distinctions is that the office of elder or pastor is a shepherding role where you have oversight, shepherding responsibility, teaching responsibility over the whole congregation. Whereas with deacons, you're not necessarily exercising that kind of authority and even influence over the whole congregation. It's often over one area in the life of the church. Deacons, we never in the New Testament find a verse like, be subject to the deacons. But we do find in 1 Peter chapter 5, be subject to the elders. We don't find a verse like obey your deacons and submit to them, but we do find that verse for elders in Hebrews 13:17. And so it's very important to maintain the distinction between the offices without wrongly demoting deacons, but we want to maintain the distinction between the office if we're going to be able to experience both in the way that God intended it for our good.
So a helpful distinction there that's Matt Smethurst in his book Deacons. We do have a number of copies of this in the office, so if it's something that you want to read and get more familiar with, this is short, succinct, and really quite useful in understanding deacons. And so for today, here is the roadmap. Last session, we looked at the biblical foundations. We went through Acts chapter 6, verses 1 through 7. And then we also looked at who the deacons are. We looked in depth at the character requirements of being a deacon. And if you remember, we said that the character requirements for deacon are very, very similar to that of elder, if not equal, other than the requirement to be able to teach is for the elders. All right. Well, what is it that deacons do? Well, a couple of things that I have. You've seen that I have labeled these talks as deacons, as ministers of mercy, and that they serve and strengthen the church. Those are the two big ideas that I think we see about what deacons are. They are ministers of mercy first, and so we'll look at that. Tim Keller said in one of his books that mercy is the impulse that makes us sensitive to hurts and lacks in others and makes us desire to alleviate them. Okay, so when now we're talking about ministers of mercy, this is what we are talking about with deacons, that they are servants who are looking and are on the hunt for hurts and lacks in others and desires to alleviate them. You're going to hear me say this later this morning, but one phrase that I like to use is that they remove barriers to joy in Jesus. Okay, so they remove the barriers of joy to Jesus. Now, looking at the difference once again between elders and deacons, we see that elders are in charge of the spiritual care of the congregation, whereas deacons are concerned with the practical care. And not that spiritual isn't practical, and not that practical isn't spiritual. It's just two functions of the church that need to be delegated out. Now, is there overlap sometimes in this? Absolutely, there's overlap in this. Think about a case if there is a widow or a shut-in that needs something done on their house, and the deacons send one of the trustees over that can fix a door or something in the house, and that deacon then does it. Should the deacon not then care for their spiritual need and pray for them? Of course they should pray for them. So there's an overlapping nature of deacons and elders in their care, but formally we look at the fact that elders are over the spiritual care of the church and that deacons are over the practical care. Hi, Tom. How are you? Good. Okay. In Jamie Dunlap's book on deacons, elders lead ministry, deacons facilitate ministry. The congregation does the ministry. And so, for example, if the elders say, or let's say that someone passes away in the church, the elders are going to minister to that particular family. The deacons would be the ones that would be over the funeral committee in order to get that material stuff mapped out, and then the congregation are the ones that come in and do the ministry of that. And we'll look at that a little bit more in detail here. Bob Thune wrote that often pastors and church members are aware of the needs within the body. It's just that no one is organizing, systematizing, and executing the meeting of those needs. That's what deacons do. They bring order where there is disorder, clarity where there is confusion, and structure where there isn't any. They make serving easier. They create pathways for people to get involved in ministry. They find solutions to problems that hinder the church's care for her members. And so do you see a pattern of what we're talking about with deacons now? That deacons are overseeing and making sure that the practical needs and the practical care of the church get taken care of. The bottom line, when it comes to the idea of ministers of mercy, again, that deacons are to find ways to remove barriers to joy and salvation and progress to the church and her members. Now, that seems like a pretty cool job title right there, that we remove barriers to joy and salvation. And so that is what we talk about when we talk about the ministers of mercy. And going back now, let me just Go back to that slide where it says that deacons are ministers of mercy. So we've talked about what mercy means, but now you can see how that mercy overflows into serving, and in that serving strengthens the church. And so they are very, very critical aspect of what the church should be and do. So, looking at some practical considerations. By the way, we'll probably get done early today unless there are some big questions. But let's look at some practical considerations. When we look at the idea that deacons are to find ways to remove barriers to joy and salvation and progress to the church and her members, there's a few things that we should look at. Let's look at removing barriers to joy. What are some of the things in life that would remove that would give us barriers to joy in Christ? Well, obviously, when life shows up, right? Sickness, financial crises, death, struggle, family relationship things. And so when we look at removing barriers, we first have to see that the deacons need to be in charge of the benevolent account. Okay, the benevolent account, which we already have in place, which is overseen by the member care, which member care is probably going to morph right into deacons. They are the ones that, when someone needs assistance within our church, provide those funds, provide that care for those folks. And you can see some of these things here. Immediate needs of members or regular attenders. Furnace goes out. Something needs fixing. You need gas to get somewhere. Also, ease of the burden of poverty, just helping people to get back to a normal course of life or a good quality of life. Offering counseling scholarships. This is something that we have done before in marriages that are in trouble. The church has come in and said, we would like to cover a session or two or three for your marriage, for you, whatever it takes to get you to be healthy again. I am not particularly trained in biblical counseling. I would love to do it hopefully when my plate gets lightened a little bit. I would love to get certified in that. And so if someone comes to me with something that is beyond my pay grade, I will often refer them out. And when I refer them out, this is one of the things that I would offer in that. Needs of widows and shut-ins, single mothers, single fathers. There are some unique needs within that population as well that the elders could certainly help in. Removing barriers to church progress and health. And so what this means is that the deacons would basically provide a structure by which serving committees would take place. That doesn't mean that they have to do everything. It just means that everything needs to be put in place and organized in order to happen. Things like oversee the needs of funerals. That doesn't mean that the deacons have to be the ones to make the food and organize everything. There may be one point person within the funeral committee that the deacons are in touch with, saying, hey, such and such passed away. Can we figure out, X, Y, and Z to do? Also, a barrier would be coordinating meal trains. I can't tell you how much of a blessing meal trains are to families that are hurting, whether it be someone that's sick and the family is tending to that person, and even making a meal can be a burden. Man, meal trains are such a blessing. And right now in our church, I can say with confidence that our meal train, we have no organization to it. So if someone has like a need, basically a meal train is just someone saying, oh, who's in charge of this? Let's maybe get that going. That's not functional, because when that happens, then people get lost in the cracks. And the same thing is with ministering to women in baby showers, and we'll get into women's ministry here in a little bit as well. Assist in the administration of the ordinances. Talking baptism and communion, it would be up to the deacons to ensure that the elements are prepared for Sunday, the first Sunday of the month for communion. and also that they would be the point people of organizing the baptism. Where's the baptism going to happen? Does it need to happen outside in a river or in a lake? Well, let's have the deacons get on that and find someone in the church that has a property like that. Providing towels, providing all those sorts of things with baptism. Oversee various serving teams. We see women's and men's ministries. Again, it does not mean that the deacons are the ones that have to do everything on that. They just ensure that these things are getting taken care of. Over the greeters and the ushers and various needs at events. Moving on, job description of the elders then. The three big things would be number one, spotting and meeting tangible needs. Number two, protecting and promoting church unity and growth. And church unity and growth, one of the most important things in keeping unity and growth is making sure that everybody is cared for. Because when 2, 3, 4 people that may be being neglected, it doesn't help when the church sees that there are some folks getting neglected. Think Acts chapter 6. And then serving and supporting the vision and ministry of the elders. So they are the ones that are doing what the elders cannot and don't have the bandwidth for. Questions about that particular aspect of the deacons? Okay. Any thoughts about it? I mean, what are your reactions to such a ministry? That would be helpful to know too. Does this sound good? Does this sound eh? Does this sound ugh? Okay. Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah. We're getting there. Yeah, like take children and youth. More than likely, Lord willing, we'd have an associate pastor um, that they would be able to report to the elders what's going on there. Same with Julie Knowles, so that the elders would know that. And part of our issue right now is that we're sort of doing double duty. You have people that are on staff that are seeing the day-to-day things of this, and then people that are on the board that aren't seeing the day-to-day things, and the communication's not always that great. And so yeah, and so it's too many people doing one particular thing. You think about properties. Properties would go under the banner of what we're probably going to call trustees. Trustees being the ones that are over the finances of the entire church and then also the care of the building. You think about worship. Worship would be under the elders. You think of discipleship, which would be under the elders. What else am I forgetting here? Missions would definitely be an elder thing. Um, Member care would be deacons. Yep. And so we also want to develop a process by which the elder board and the deacons are consistently communicating, so that when the elders, ideally, I don't think it's going to happen this way, but ideally the elders would meet on the same night as the deacons. And so then after a meeting, maybe the church chairman and the head deacon could meet for 5 minutes and just say, hey, here's some of the things that we talked about, so that everybody can be on the same page. Here's what we need from you. Here's what we need from you. Those sorts of things. So yes, those are all in the works. It's just a matter of mapping them out and how does all that happen. So yeah. Other thoughts? There probably should be. The deacons among themselves can probably figure out who needs to be the lead. But yeah, and you would also, I think that you would want records being kept from the deacons as well, just to kind of keep accountability in that, as the elders should as well. But yeah, there should be a point person on diaconate. All right. Should we move on? All right. Jim, if we get done early, does that mean more pie?
No, I already ate your pizza.
You already ate my...
I reserved mine.
Perfect. Part 4, practical matters. Again, when we talk about practical matters with deacons, there is not much biblical data in the Bible. We are left to be creative in how we as a church will structure the diaconate. And so that's the duty of the Constitution Committee right now, to sort of figure that out. And again, bylaws can always be amended. Constitutions can always be amended. So if things don't work out a particular way, we can structure it to fit our needs. And so, just like we did for elders, we're going to look at deacon process for identifying and training and installation. So just like we did for the elders. It's not, deacons, by the way, are not nearly as intricate of a process or as long of a process as elders. Deacons are relatively simple. Step 1, this would be January, somewhere in there. Not year 1, January. Elders brainstorm names of potential deacons. They get feedback from the congregation of who would make good deacons. Those names are placed on a master list, much like the elders. No names are discarded, men and women, by the way. The point of this step is just to generate a list of names. And the current elders go through the list, discuss various aspects of the names on the list based on identification metrics. Again, are they members? Are they involved? Do they give? We don't care how much they give. We just want to know, do they give? The screening helps to determine if the potential candidate shows an above average commitment to the church and or potential concerns. Congregation suggestions are welcome. And the reason that we look for above average commitment to the church is because if you have a committee, I shouldn't even call them a committee, a team or a board sounds too corporate. If the deacons are meant to serve the church, and you have a group of deacons that are only half-hearted members of the church, they're just there to fill a warm body. It is not going to help serve other people. We want people who are available and desiring to help, that sort of thing. Special consideration for deacon qualifications will be in view. Step 2, invite potential deacons. Elders invite potential deacons to be put on the annual meeting ballot. A month will be given for prayer and consideration. So whereas the elders, we would say to them about this point, are you interested in being trained? And then we would put them in the meeting minutes for the annual meeting to say, in a year, these guys might be potential elders, and it's a year process. This isn't. This is saying, hey, February, are you interested in doing this? Yes, I'm interested in doing it. Boom, we're going to put you on the annual meeting. And there might be some interviews there and just checking qualifications and all that. But that's where we want a month of prayer and consideration. And then in March, the potential deacon would affirm or deny the recommendation or nomination, however you would want to look at it. Okay, so that's step 3. And then step 4 would be the congregational affirmation. So potential deacons then would be formally nominated to the congregation for vote. If affirmative, the candidate would immediately start serving. So unlike member care, where member care right now is the member care team just saying, hey, such and such, do you want to be on the member care? And they say, yeah, we'll show up to a meeting. Meeting's at this time. That's not going to happen anymore because deacons have certain character requirements listed out in 1 Timothy chapter 3. We are required then to at least vet. Okay, so I already talked about the differences between the timeline of candidates for elders versus deacon. And then the next thing I want to do is show you a video of how the role of deacons relates to the role of elders.
The office of deacon is not parallel to the office of elder. It is subordinate to, it's a supporting office. And so I think it's rightly said that deacons report to the elders. Now, some churches get this wrong in one of two main ways. I think that some churches wrongly elevate the office of deacon and treat deacons as kind of de facto elders. But you also see other churches wrongly reduce the office of deacon, and deacons get treated as just kind of glorified janitors. But both of those errors, I believe, falls short of the Bible's high vision for the office. When deacons are functioning like elders, you miss out on both offices because not only don't you have biblical elders, but you don't have biblical deacons. But in the same way, deacons are far more than just business managers or handymen. Deacons are model servants, recognized by a congregation and called to mobilize and organize practical service. And so the way we see the relationship play out in the New Testament between elders and deacons is a relationship where there is an inseparable connection and yet a logical priority. So think about, for instance, Philippians 1:1. Paul writes to the saints at Philippi and to the overseers, that is the elders, and the deacons. It's interesting, you see all the church members represented there, the saints, the elders, and the deacons. The elders are those who are leading the ministry, the deacons are those who are facilitating the ministry, and the congregation is who is doing the ministry. And when Paul says it, he doesn't say to the deacons and to the elders, it's to the elders and the deacons. It's almost like he doesn't want us to catch our breath. He wants us to feel that inseparable connection between the two offices, but also that logical order. The office of deacon is a serving and supporting office to that of elder, and it's the exact same thing in 1 Timothy 3. Paul first charts out the qualifications for elders, and then immediately afterward, the qualifications for deacons. And so, show me a church with distracted elders and a derailed mission, and I will show you a church without effective deacons.
So let's talk about a typical deacon meeting. Did I lose my what? I'm here. Yep, I am here. Yes. Typical deacon meeting, that is still to be worked out, but what I would imagine it being is them going over the finances of what the benevolent fund would look like. Also, it would probably be looking at the calendar and seeing what sort of things are needed. Like we have the barbecue and the pool party coming up, and in August, and so they would ensure, well, who's the point person on that? What's the report of how that's going? If there's any other a funeral coming up, and they have meetings saying, hey, what do we need to provide to serve the families of the deceased better? Those sorts of things, and so. It's a meeting of the minds just to make sure that everything is flowing the way that it should. And I know that sounds ambiguous right now, and it's simply because we just haven't mapped that out yet. And so we're getting there. And again, it's fluid given the biblical data. Constitution and bylaws work. I wish that I could show you what we're looking at for the Constitution and bylaws work, but we haven't written that yet. That's actually at our next meeting coming up of writing all of this out. And so we don't have that quite yet. It is coming soon. And so then the final thing that I would have for this again would be any questions, comments, thoughts, or disagreements, or suggestions would be great too. Dave Goldsmith, you look like you're waiting to say something. Okay. Well, I hope this has been helpful and hopefully clearing some of the mud out of the water of where we're going with as far as elders and deacons. We have not talked at all about the trustees. I just touched on it lightly today, and for now, I think that's probably sufficient enough. Again, my hope is that this fall we would make that transition over. But I do know that sometimes things kind of get in the way and things get pushed back. So I hold that with an open hand of our timeline from there.
Thank you for joining us for this session on the leadership transition at Emmanuel Baptist Church. If you would like more information, visit www.emmanuelmora.com/transition or scan the QR code on the screen.